Let's start by discussing the previous blueprint. These two parts are both outer fabrics. One is the upper part of the front piece. The other is the upper part of the back piece. Both of these parts have lines like this on top. There is a line here on the back piece. Then there are two lines here on the front piece. We need to cut it along the lines. After cutting, it looks like this. This is what it looks like after we've cut it off. I suggest marking the shoulder area. The reason for marking is that these sequins are rather small. After shuffling them later, I'm afraid you might lose track, including when we draw the patterns later. We also mark these spots on the fabric. The outer fabric of the upper front piece and the outer fabric of the upper back piece. After cutting everything, these are the ones among the four pieces. When we sew later, first, place the three middle pieces with their right sides facing. Position the remaining four pieces according to the locations of the four Pair them face to face. Similarly, sew at the pointed seam position. Now, let's discuss the lining. The upper part of the lining fabric doesn't need to be pieced together. Just follow the pattern directly. Add your own markings and make the necessary reductions. The main focus is on the lower part of the lining fabric. If you want to make a half lining, we don't need to draw the lower half of this lining. If you want to make a full lining, then the lower half of this lining is also needed. Of course, the lower half of the outer fabric is necessary. Also, there is the lower part of this back piece. I suggest that when we draw on the fabric, we make a mark at this spot. Because now, for example, if we change its direction, you will find that this position and our position have somewhat similar shapes. So after we cut the fabric, it's easy to confuse these two directions. So try to make some marks to avoid mixing up the directions later. When officially measuring the seam, we need to make a tuck fold here at the lower part. After making the tuck fold, align it with this position on the join them together. On the other side, just flip it over. Then similarly, make a tuck fold at this position. Join this part here together. The lower part of the front piece needs to be pleated along this whole section. Then align it with this position on the upper part. Join together. Let's take another look at this material piece for the lower half of the shell. If making a semi-internal scale, I suggest taking the bottom edge at the very bottom and leave at least 7 millimeters for the seam because here. It is a semi-internal scale. So for this position, we will later. Finally, it is folded inward and upward. If it's too little, then it will be difficult for us to sew including later. The bottom edges of the two thick pieces. Leave a 7 millimeter allowance. Finally, we have the fabric piece for this sleeve. I recommend leaving a 7 millimeters seam allowance at the bottom edge because here we also need to fold it inward to finish the seam. As per my usual practice, I usually sew a 5 millimeters top stitch, so this clearance should be at least 7 millimeters. Of course, if your open wire traces are very narrow, you don't need to leave that much clearance. Set it according to your own preference. Let's start by working on the sleeve part. There is a line at this spot on the sleeve pattern. We draw it at the same position on the pattern piece. Then fold the hem inward along the wind line. Top stitch the front edge to finish. After folding, it looks like this. Here I stitched 2 lines. It's not necessary to stitch 2 lines. This is just my personal preference. The wider line here is a 5 millimeter top stitch. The narrower one is a 1 millimeter visible line. If you don't like stitching so densely, normally the stitch is 3 millimeters. Or stitches of 5 millimeters are also fine. We make a stitch here to adjust the tightness. The tension sewing position is from this point to this point. Do not sew outside the seat seam, because in the end, we want to do it like this. Fold it together and sew it. If you sew it outside, one problem is that this area gets very thick. Another issue is that the elastic is stretchy. If you sew from the outside, this side will wrinkle up. It will also be hard to sew when we stitch it later. When sewing, we can position the elastic slightly forward, because if you place it just right at this spot, we will need to pull the elastic shortly, which might pull it off. So we move the elastic band forward a bit, but the point where the needle goes down is still the point we just mentioned. At the beginning, let's sew a few back and forth stitches to secure it. Then we tighten the elastic band. You need to stretch this elastic band to its tightest point. Keep stretching it until it reaches the other end point. Then we trim off the excess elastic band at both ends. Finally, fold this part at the top of the sleeve in half. Locate the center point and mark it. The other sleeve is handled in the same way. After completing the two sleeves, next set them aside move on to the flying sleeve. For the flying sleeve, take a piece of fabric and fold it in half. Then fold along this horizontal line, a line with the straight edge of the flying sleeve. Draw the curve next to it. After drawing, leave a 5mm seam allowance. Cut out the flying sleeve. For this set, I used mesh fabric to make flutter sleeves. You can also use pure cotton fabric. I also have a set that uses this kind of single layer edging. We also align the edging position with a straight line. Draw the curved part. Then similarly, leave a 5mm seam allowance and cut it out. The method for making a single layer is the same as for a double layer. It just lacks one folded piece of fabric. A step in drawing the flutter sleeve. Continue working on this flying sleeve. We sew along the seam line 2mm on each side. We stitch it with a basting stitch. For the basting stitch, I use a stitch length of 4. Then do not backstitch at the beginning or end. Pulling back, we tighten the two bottom lines at the same time. Pull this one out. The other flying sleeve is handled the same way. After handling, both are kept ready for use. For the two, one must be attached to the ruby. Let's start sewing it together. The center part of the front and back pieces of the outer layer. This is where the front sides are aligned and sewn at the seam allowance. After sewing, press the seam allowances open to both sides. You can scrape it with your fingernail or steam press it lightly. Then we take out these two parts of the front piece and also this part of the back piece. This part of the back piece is drawn on both the left so there are also two of them. Then, like in the video, we position them diagonally facing each other in pairs. Here the fronts are facing each other. It is also at this seam allowance position. After sewing, unfold them all as well. The dart seams are pressed toward both sides. After sewing these three front parts, this is how we lay it out. The back part here is wider. This position is where the back pieces are joined. The front part here is narrower. The next steps. Actually, we just need to put them like together. This, aligned face to face and joined together. But before joining, we need to first machine off the burr. after machining off the burr. Let's continue with this step. We need to treat the rust spots by working upwards on the front side. Here we can draw the crease line and mark it on the front side. Then we need to pay attention to a point here. 2 dots, 3 dots, 4 dots. Our flying rust is exactly between the 2 dots on the left and right of the car. If later our upper and lower parts, the position where the pieces also need the car's visible line details, it is recommended to start about 2 millimeters away from this point. Then begin, including at the end. Also, stop about 2 millimeters away from the point below. Otherwise, when joining the upper and lower parts later, regarding the visible turning line, it will be the distance to the flash. Then after we remove the flash, the dimension after bending is the distance between these 2 points. After adjusting properly, we then sew on facing the machine directly. If friends worry about inaccurate sewing, you can also use hand stitching to make a preliminary seam. Then sew with the machine. After painting, inspect both the front and back sides. If there are no problems, we will first remove the front drawer. Then use the same method to apply the rust remover to the other side. After both sides have been properly machined, flip it over like this to the front side to check whether the size of the rust flakes on both sides matches. A slight difference is normal. But if the difference is significantly large, the rusted area on one side of the car, the other side is very narrow. In this part, definitely, you need to dismantle it and modify it again. Try to make it more symmetrical. Then proceed to the next step. This is what we talked about earlier. Take these 2 pieces on this side and sew them together with their fronts facing each other. When sewing, the part we sewed at the front is facing upward. When sewing, make sure the top and bottom seam lines are aligned. The pointed seam positions should also be aligned. The other side is also sewn and joined together in the same way. After sewing, we unfold this part. The style lines at these spots, they can all be connected into a straight line. If there's a big difference, then this part might need a slight adjustment. Also, if the visible lines are done well, folks, it is recommended to top stitch along these 2 sides. When top stitching here, the seam allowances at the bottom on both sides are directed towards the neckline. Next, take out the lining fabric. For the lining, align the right sides together at the tip of the seam and sew. After stitching, unfold the front and back pieces as usual. At the notch seam, press the seam allowance open to both sides. At this point, we take out the prepared outer fabric from earlier. Here you can see our lining and outer fabric are now the same. The only difference is that our tablecloth is stitched with rust pattern fabric. Next, we take out the front and back pieces of the lower part of the tablecloth. We make tucks at this position on the front piece, then join it to the upper part. The dimensions here are the same. Make tucks here on the back piece. After folding, the other piece is also folded here. After folding, then comes this lining fabric. Because I'm currently making a half lining for this set, so I haven't cut the lower part of the lining fabric. These three pieces here are just the lower parts of the outer fabric. In other words, if you want to make a full lining, then for this lower part, you need to use the lining fabric and cut a piece out as well. Next, we make the dart fold. It's best to mark this spot on the back piece. As mentioned earlier, because this part we change the direction. It is also somewhat similar. Placing this mark, it is to prevent errors in folding. The folding position, here I'm making a double line fold. It's just along the style line at 2 millimeters to the left and 2 millimeters. Each card draws a pull line. Pull line zone, I use number 4. Do not sew basting stitches at the after properly removing the stitches. At the same time, tighten the two pull out the pleats. Adjust the length according to the measurements at this position. Then pay attention to this pleat. It is concentrated more towards the middle, at the beginning and the end here. There should be at least a 1 centimeter space. That area has no pleats because both sides are for creating vent openings. This way is more convenient. We will sew later. The two back pieces are also pleated using the same method. The pleats are concentrated in the center part. Leave a gap at the front, then take the lower halves of the front and back pieces and their upper halves. Sew them together with the right sides facing each other. After finishing the front assembly, we splice the back piece. Similarly, the front sides face each other. Pay attention to the direction when splicing. This is the lower part of the embroidery. This position, it is exactly at this curve. It faces outward. Then they face each other directly. Sewn together. When measuring the seam, pay attention to our fascia. Don't measure fascia. You can slightly move it to the side. These three parts after measuring the seam, you can flip it to the pleats. If there are no issues, then remove all the gathering stitches. After stitching together, we will have our complete front. It's like this. Pieces. Flip to the back. We just assembled this position of these parts. They can be connected together. It's the same in this case. If the difference is too large, everyone should adjust based on the actual situation. Make some adjustments. Next, we take out the lining fabric. If the lining is made as a half lining, only the upper part is needed. We place the lining and the outer fabric right sides together, aligning the area around the neckline. When sewing, we keep the outer fabric facing up. Start sewing from this position. Sew along the neckline circle down to this position. If you want to make a full lining, then our lining also needs to be joined at the bottom part. This corresponds to the cut pieces of our lining. They are the same. They just lack one raglan sleeve that we joined. With the front sides facing each other from this position, start sewing down this circle. To this point, these two ends are sewn all the way through. After unpicking, We clip the seam allowance, the opening on the back at this upper spot. Let's trim it at an angle. Make a cut at the right angle position. Be careful not to cut the thread, but don't cut too shallow. If it's too shallow after flipping it over later, this part will wrinkle. Then we turn this part to the front side. Use tweezers to tidy up the edges and corners. Gently iron around the neckline to smooth it out. Then we take this circle around the neckline. Remove the highlighted line. The highlighted line in this position is quite challenging. If the extraction doesn't go well for you, just use a flat iron to smooth it out. Here is the video on removing the highlighted line. I missed a section. Anyway, just apply it to this side of the neckline. Just go around once to remove it. After finishing the removal, let's work on the bottom edge of this lining. Here we fold it directly along to make an inward seam fold. Using the long stitch method, sew the crease position to the part we just joined earlier. Together along the marked thread line. The other two positions are handled the same way. Or you can also choose not to fold it inward. Then we simply fold it down like this. Sew a visible stitch on the front to secure it. However, for sisters who do hemming, this is not recommended. Using the long stitch method will definitely produce a more refined finish. Or we can first fold this part inward. After folding inward, take out a visible seam on the front side. It's also fine to fix this part here, but the difficulty differs between folding inward when removing the visible seam. The difficulty is definitely different. Everyone can choose based on the actual situation. This is also what it looks like after flipping the full lining. With the full lining, we don't need to handle it the way we just did. We don't need to handle the inner folded lining. Simply attach the sleeve once at the embroidery hoop position on the front. Don't pull on the lining, only sew on the outer part. After the lining is properly handled, now let's attach this sleeve. The video of removing the sleeve here includes a clip. Then we cut a piece from another part and brought it over. So here, only the fabric is different, but the way the sleeve is attached is the same. First, just now on this side of the sleeve, we made a center point as a mark. This center point will be aligned with our shoulder seam position shortly. Then we just follow the curve, sewing and aligning at the same time. This is how it looks after attaching the sleeves to the full lining. Of course, if making a half lining, like after completing the previous steps we discussed, this sleeve is sewn together with both the lining and the outer fabric. Unlike a full lining, it is not separated. In the case of a full lining, we take the front piece and the back piece of the lining and place them right sides together. Just stack them together like this. Then sew the side seam here. The side seam on the other side also needs sewing. After finishing sewing the lining side seams, we sew the outer side seam and the sleeves. Here, similarly, the front and back pieces of the outer fabric are joined. They are joined from the side seam toward the sleeve. If sewing the half lining, then only this step is needed. The previous stitching step, the lining side seam, is unnecessary because for our half lining, the lining and outer fabric are joined together after aligning one side. Let's switch to the other side. It's in the same position. Once everything is in place, cut the armpit area on both sides. After cutting, we'll separate the hem of the lining and the outer fabric. At this point, the front piece is aligned with the other. The back piece is aligned with the other. Then we sew along the entire seam directly in this way. Sew the lining and outer fabric together. Align the collar position when you reach the middle. Then spread the garment style to both sides. Then trim the garment edges at the right angled corners on both sides. Turn the garment to the front from the lining adjustment area. After turning it over, tidy up the edges and corners. Smooth pressing. The top stitching is pulled nicely. It's recommended to have an opening at the back. Also the hem, adjust the top stitching at all these positions. If you're a sister who feels a bit unsure, just steam press it flat and sew a snap button on the back. Now let's take a look at this half lining. We have finished sewing the half lining, the outer fabric, and the side seams. Then fold the hem of the lower part and fold the side seams inward and sew them, and that's it. Finally, do the same at the back. Attach a snap button or Velcro. Our top is now complete. This season we have 2 styles of pants, but actually the manufacturing process is quite similar. The main difference lies in the hem of the pants. Except for the hem, the rest of the sewing steps are basically the same. Here, I'll primarily begin by discussing the style issue. What you're seeing now is relatively loose. Those are the shorter shorts. And then regarding these pants, we leave about a 7mm style detail because the edge needs to be folded in. Leave a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance at the waistband. Leave a normal 5mm seam allowance at other positions. First, we fold the seam allowance of the bottom edge inward to the wrong side. Then sew a top stitch on the right side to finish the edge. Both pant legs are treated the same way. Simply fold inward along the seam line. After measuring the top stitching, it looks like this. Then here I used a piece of piping. The size of the piping you can choose based on the actual situation. For example, for smaller sizes, we use narrower borders. For slightly larger sizes like 6 fen or similar, we use wider borders. The position of the drawing edge can choose according to their own preference. The position here just perfectly covers the line marking of the car ahead. Then when sewing, choose a spot on the edge where the stitching is relatively dense. This way, the stitching lines won't be very noticeable. Try to choose thread that is close in color to the edge we painted. Then, Pay attention to a detail when stitching. That is, we stitch along one side. At the same time, straighten the fabric of the pants underneath. You can apply a bit of force, but don't apply so much force that the pants get distorted. Because if you just sew over it while it's flat like this, later, after we finish pressing it flat, this spot might have a slight wrinkle. It's the spot where the edge line is stitched. So when we sew, you can hold the fabric underneath with your right hand straight and tighter. No need to pull the top seam. Just sew the top seam smoothly and evenly. After sewing, it looks like this. Handle both pant legs using the same method. As for the other side, I didn't pull the seam. Only the border on one side was drawn. This is the fabric piece for the long pants. Except for the waistband area, leave a 1.5 for the other areas allowance. Just leave a normal 5 millimeter seam. Then we make a tuck at the hem of the pants. Here I made a double stitch tuck. It's exactly 2 millimeters to the left and right of the crease line. So once to form the crease line. Here I use thread number 4 to sew the crease line. Do not backstitch at the front and back. Simultaneously tighten both bobbin threads to pull out the fold. Then, on the pants blueprint, there is a specified measurement for the hem seam. We follow this measurement as indicated on the blueprint. We add the seam allowance before cutting. After measuring the fold, the size matches the hem seam measurement. Then we sew these two parts together with their right sides facing each other. After measuring, flip it to the front and inspect. If the fold is correct, then remove the tuck fold line made earlier. Then trim slightly, leaving about a 3 millimeter seam allowance. Unfold these two parts and turn them over to the back side. Fold down along the crease line at the top position. After folding, fold it once more. Fold it once again. This way, we neatly cover the stitching line we just made. Then flip it to the front side where a visible stitch holds it in place. Both pant legs are finished using this method. Pour a cup. After finishing both pant legs, we now place the two fabric pieces with their right sides facing each other. Sew at the front single position indicated on our pattern. After measuring, make several notches at the areas with larger curves. The side near the waistband can also be trimmed a bit. Then we fold inward along this style line. After folding down, we can first iron it. Once it's ironed flat, we measure the line. Here I measured 2 lines. After measuring the lines, it looks like this. The spacing between these 2 lines is 5 millimeters. Looking at the reverse side, it looks like this. Then we thread the elastic band through this bottom position. For the elastic band, I use a bias tape maker myself. If you don't have such a tool, you can buy one. If you don't want to buy one, just use a pin yourself or any other tools that can pass through elastic bands. Hook the elastic band in place. Then we pull this end over. First, secure it with a few pins. Then take out the doll's body frame. Wrap it around its waist. Seems to be about the right size. Then we fix the other side as well. Trim off the excess elastic band. Next, we join the two material pieces together again. With the front sides facing each other. Sew at the position marked as thick on our pattern. After sewing, We also make some clip notches at the areas with larger curves. Then we pull open the bottom area. Align the two fabric pieces vertically, spreading them apart to each side. Sew along the crotch seam. After unpicking, make some clip notches on this fabric piece. Then spread the fabric at this spot apart to both sides. You can press it to set the shape. Turning it this way to the front makes this area smoother. Then we flip the pants to the front. Decorate it according to your own taste. The pants are now done. When making socks here, I start by taking a larger piece of fabric and drawing a line on its front side. We fold inward along this line, sew it, and then trim the seam at the back. I used a 5mm seam allowance, but you can adjust it as you like. Anything between 3 and 5mm is fine. A key detail is that our fabric is knit fabric, which has stretch. So while sewing, we pull the fabric backward to slightly stretch it. This makes the socks easier to wear once sewn. If you don't stretch the fabric at all, its elasticity will be locked by the seam. You should control the stretching tension yourself. Moderate is best. Due to the stretching, after sewing, this area will have wavy edges. This is normal, so don't worry about it. Then we flip it to the back and trim the excess seam allowance here slightly, leaving a 2 to 3mm seam allowance. Then we take out the socks applique. There is a mark of 2 half circles on it. This mark indicates the pattern is only half, so we need to flip it over to draw the other half. However, when sewing the sock, we just need to align and draw half. Then fold the fabric in half and sew from here upward to this point. Additionally, this sock has a decorative part, so we first sew the fabric, open the sock's applique, and take a piece of lace. We fold the lace in half and sew it here. That is, align the center point of the lace width with a straight line underneath. The outer edge on the right side is approximately 1 centimeter. Sew directly along the previously stitched line to secure it. After sewing, we trim the excess lace, then fold the fabric along the straight line and sew along the sock's original seam. After sewing, we can reinforce the seam edge with a few stitches to prevent the thread from pulling loose when frequently putting on and taking off the socks. Then leave about a 3 centimeter seam allowance and cut off the sock. After cutting, turn the sock inside out and fold the lace downward. Then sew a button on the front of the lace to secure it. When finishing the stitch, pick up a stitch on the adjacent fabric, then wrap the thread around the needle twice before pulling it out. This will make it more secure. Trim off the excess thread and the sock is complete.